In February 2025, the U.S. government shocked global markets by imposing a steep 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada, igniting a trade conflict unlike anything seen before. With over 80% of Mexico's exports directed toward the U.S., the response from Mexico was not only swift, but also strategic. And at the center of the storm, the auto industry, which accounts for 27% of Mexico's export value, now stands at serious risk. It all began when the U.S. administration tightened trade policies with major partners, aiming to protect domestic manufacturing and increase border control. But Mexico is not a minor player. The country is the top supplier of goods to the U.S., and its production network is deeply intertwined with the North American economy. As soon as the tariffs were announced, Mexico's markets went into shock. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum didn't hold back, declaring, "We will not accept this imposition." To reinforce her stance, Sheinbaum led a massive protest at Zocalo Square in Mexico City. Tens of thousands of people waved Mexican flags and chanted, "Mexico deserves respect." But Mexico's response wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. The Mexican government quickly engaged in diplomatic efforts to limit the fallout from the new tariffs. What followed was a high-stakes game of political and economic maneuvering that's still unfolding. Under intense pressure from businesses and the public, Mexico avoided an immediate escalation by turning to negotiation. Within weeks, President Sheinbaum met directly with the White House. The result? A temporary reprieve. The U.S. agreed to delay tariffs on goods covered under the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, until April 2nd. Mexico celebrated this as a win, but not a complete one. The U.S. government refused to lift tariffs on steel and aluminum, two critical materials for the auto industry. That decision has left North American automakers scrambling to adjust. Ford, GM, and Stellantis quickly raised alarms that rising production costs could lead to higher car prices and potential factory closures. The question now: how much damage can the industry absorb before it breaks? If you're planning to buy a new car soon, you might want to think twice. Ford has warned that tariffs could push the price of an F-150 truck up by as much as $12,000. GM and Stellantis have suggested they may need to reduce production or even shut down some plants to manage rising costs. Why the chaos? It comes down to the supply chain. The North American auto industry relies on an incredibly complex production network. Some auto parts cross the US-Mexico border up to 8 times before a car is completed. Every crossing under the new tariff means an extra cost, and that cost will be passed on to consumers. Electric vehicles, EVs, aren't immune either. Batteries, sensors, and electric motors, many sourced from Mexico, are about to get a lot more expensive. That's bad news for an industry that's already struggling to meet demand for affordable EVs. And it doesn't stop there. The tariffs have created a domino effect that's shaking the entire economy. As soon as the tariffs were announced, the financial markets took a hit. The Dow Jones dropped over 700 points in a matter of days. Meanwhile, the Mexican peso weakened by 5% against the US dollar, driving up domestic prices and adding pressure on Mexico's already fragile economy. But Mexico is not standing still. The Mexican government is aggressively pursuing new trade deals with Brazil, China, and other South American countries to reduce dependence on the US market. These moves could permanently alter trade flows across the Americas. Mexico has also hit back with retaliatory tariffs on key US agricultural exports. Corn, soybeans, and avocados, major US exports to Mexico, are now subject to steep Mexican tariffs. This is a major blow to farmers in Texas and California, who are already grappling with rising costs and uncertain market conditions. This conflict is far from over. The temporary tariff suspension under USMCA will expire on April 2nd, and if no resolution is reached, the full 25% tariffs will take effect across all sectors. Will Mexico and the US find common ground, or are we headed toward a full-scale trade war? One thing is certain: the future of North America's auto industry and the broader economy is hanging in the balance. Stay tuned. Canada breaking away from the US, Europe becoming the new partner. In 2025, trade between Canada and the EU has surged by over 50% in just 6 years, while trade relations with the US have hit rock bottom for the first time in decades. Canada's Prime Minister has not chosen Washington as his first official visit. Instead, he went straight to Europe. Is this the moment Canada finally steps away from America's influence? Trade war. The US slaps Canada with tariffs. Once one of the strongest trade relationships in the world, Canada and the US are now locked in a trade war, and it all started with Washington's aggressive tariff policies in 2025. February 1st, 2025. The US imposed a 25% tariff on most Canadian imports. March 11th, 2025. The US doubled tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to a staggering 50%, sending shockwaves through global metal markets. For Canada, it was an economic nightmare. But Ottawa wasn't about to sit idly by. March 12th, 2025, Canada strikes back, announcing a 25% retaliatory tariff on $21 billion worth of American goods. And this time, it wasn't just symbolic. Canada hit back where it hurts, targeting steel and aluminum, crippling US exports, consumer goods, from processed foods to household items. High-tech products, a massive industry between the two nations. For the first time in modern history, Canada is showing that it no longer relies on the US for economic survival. And this is where things get even more interesting. Europe, Canada's new strategic partner. In a shocking move, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney skipped Washington altogether in his first official trip and went straight to France and the UK. Why? The CETA trade deal, Canada-EU trade agreement, has boosted Canada-EU trade by over 50% since 2017. The EU is now Canada's third largest trade partner, only behind the US and China. Canadian exports to the EU have soared 46.4% since 2016, giving Canada more options than ever before. Mark Carney himself made it crystal clear. Canada is the most European nation outside of Europe, and it's not just about trade. Canada's pivot to Europe is also about military power. Canada joins Europe's military alliance. A shift in global power? Canada isn't just looking to Europe for economic strength. It's also making big moves in the military sphere. Some major developments. Canada joins the EU's PESCO military project, allowing faster troop movements across Europe. Canada leads NATO forces in Latvia, solidifying its role in defending Europe from external threats. Canada expands intelligence sharing with the UK, boosting cybersecurity and economic warfare defenses. For the first time ever, a non-EU nation is participating in PESCO, proving that Canada is now an essential player in European security. The message is clear. Canada is no longer looking only to the US for global leadership. The US reacts, but is it losing control? The White House is not happy, and Washington is pulling every trick in the book to pull Canada back. The US has threatened higher auto tariffs, targeting one of Canada's biggest exports. Major US corporations have been pressured to reduce business with Canada in a move to apply economic leverage. But here's the problem for Washington. Canadians are done with America's tactics. A February 2025 Abacus data poll reveals 68% of Canadians view the EU more favorably than the US. 44% believe Canada should even consider joining the EU, something unthinkable a decade ago. For decades, Canada was America's closest ally. But now, the numbers don't lie. Canadians are looking for a new future. Final question: will America keep Canada or lose it forever? Canada's shift toward Europe is not just about economics, it's a geopolitical earthquake. The US is rapidly losing its grip over a nation it once considered an unshakable ally. So the real question is, can Washington turn the tide? Or is Canada already gone? The next moves from Washington and Ottawa will determine the future of North America. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The US has maintained a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. In response, Canada imposed retaliatory tariffs worth $2.7 billion on a wide range of US products, disrupting the auto industry, consumer goods, and energy sectors. What are the consequences? Rising car prices, billions lost in the US coal industry, and severe supply chain disruptions. Who will bear the greater losses, Canada or the US? Canada has not only responded with tariffs, but has also implemented strategic economic measures across various levels. Government of Canada's countermeasures 25% tariff on U.S. steel and aluminum, causing an estimated $1.1 billion in losses for U.S. businesses. Tariffs on sporting goods, computers, electronics, and household appliances, affecting $1.6 billion worth of U.S. exports. Actions taken by Canadian provinces. Ontario banned U.S. liquor from its government-regulated retail system, impacting major brands like Jack Daniel's and Jim Beam. Quebec prioritized domestic suppliers in government contracts, reducing reliance on U.S. imports. Alberta diversified its supply chain, seeking imports from the EU, Japan, and South Korea instead of the U.S. The goal? Reduce dependence on U.S. imports and apply economic pressure on American businesses. Can the U.S. withstand this economic squeeze? The U.S. auto industry heavily depends on Canadian steel and aluminum, and now it's facing serious setbacks. 80% of steel and aluminum used in U.S. auto manufacturing comes from Canada. Higher raw material costs could increase the price of a Ford F-150 by $400 to $600. Major U.S. automakers hit hard. Ford, facing $1.2 billion in additional costs per year if tariffs persist. General Motors, GM, expected to absorb $800 million in extra costs annually. Tesla could see car prices rise by $1,000 per unit due to increased aluminum costs. Ripple effects on supply chains. Over 10,000 jobs in Detroit's auto industry could be at risk if manufacturers are forced to cut production. Consumers will feel the impact, with rising vehicle prices potentially reducing demand and slowing the economy. If the trade war drags on, U.S. car prices could increase by 5 to 10% in 2025. One of Canada's most damaging moves was blocking U.S. coal exports through British Columbia ports, directly hitting the American coal industry. 11.7 million tons of U.S. thermal coal are exported through Canada each year, valued at over $1.5 billion. 65% of U.S. coal exports to Asia rely on Canadian ports, mainly serving China, Japan, and South Korea. Major consequences. Transportation costs could rise by at least 30% as U.S. coal companies search for alternative ports, losing market share to competitors like Australia and Indonesia, which have lower shipping costs. Montana and Wyoming economies could lose over $500 million per year due to declining coal exports. Wider economic impact. Thousands of jobs in the U.S. coal industry could be lost, particularly in Wyoming and Montana. U.S. coal companies face potential closures, leading to financial turmoil in coal-dependent regions. If Canada holds its stance, the U.S. could lose billions in coal revenue in the coming years. The U.S.-Canada trade war is inflicting heavy economic damage on both sides. The U.S. auto industry struggles with rising material costs. The U.S. coal industry is losing a critical export route to Asia. Canada is aggressively diversifying its supply chain to reduce reliance on U.S. goods. If tensions continue, the U.S. economy could lose tens of billions of dollars in 2025. Who do you think will suffer more, Canada or the U.S.? Don't leave yet. The following information may be useful to you. Elon Musk and the political game. Who really benefits? Can you believe it? A $2.4 billion U.S. government contract was quietly shifted from Verizon to Elon Musk's SpaceX, a highly controversial decision even among Musk's supporters. How did SpaceX manage to secure this lucrative deal? And why are all investigations into Musk and his companies seemingly disappearing? The $2.4 billion FAA contract from Verizon to SpaceX. It all starts with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. The agency had previously awarded Verizon a $2.4 billion contract to modernize the U.S. air traffic communication system, an essential project ensuring the safety of millions of passengers every day. But then, an unexpected twist. The government is now considering canceling Verizon's contract and handing it over to SpaceX, Musk's company. Is this really about improving technology or just a strategic move to funnel billions more into Musk's empire? It's worth noting that Musk had publicly stated that he would avoid conflicts of interest. But is that really the case? A new form of corruption. Why are Musk's investigations disappearing? Beyond landing massive contracts, Musk seems to possess another remarkable ability, making all investigations into Tesla and SpaceX disappear. FAA had an ongoing investigation into a SpaceX rocket explosion. Now silence. Tesla was fined over $600,000 for safety violations. No one talks about it anymore. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, received over 300 complaints about Tesla. Its leadership was suddenly fired. Look at the agencies that once investigated Musk. Department of Justice, DOJ, Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, all of them had active investigations into Musk's businesses. And the result? Their leaders were replaced, fired, or stripped of power one by one. This isn't just a coincidence, it's part of a new corruption model. Remove those who stand in the way, then pave the path for unchecked business expansion. This raises critical questions. How has Musk managed to manipulate the system so effectively? Who is helping Musk dismantle regulatory barriers? Musk, Trump, and the power network. It's not just about government contracts. Musk is also benefiting from a deeply connected power structure. The SEC ordered Musk to pay $150 million for stock violations. The SEC chair was replaced. The Department of the Interior, DOI, clashed with Musk over environmental concerns. Now, the agency is powerless against him. The Federal Election Commission, FEC, was investigating Musk's political funding. Its leader was fired. Are all these just coincidences? Or is this an entirely new corruption model where those in power eliminate legal barriers for each other, creating an unstoppable business empire? Who truly benefits in the end? Elon Musk presents himself as a warrior against government corruption, but his actions tell a different story, one where legal barriers disappear to serve his business empire. A $2.4 billion FAA contract was awarded to Verizon. But now, without open competition, it's shifting to SpaceX. Is this really about innovation or just another strategic power grab? Investigations into Musk's companies are vanishing. The FAA, DOJ, SEC, and CFPB all had active cases against Tesla and SpaceX, yet leadership shakeups and firings have silenced them. Regulators are being sidelined. Officials responsible for enforcing corporate accountability are removed, replaced, or stripped of power, ensuring Musk businesses remain untouchable. From stock manipulation to labor violations, every challenge Musk faces seems to dissolve. Is this because his companies are innocent, or because the system is being reshaped in his favor? In just a few days, the US economy has seen some shocking changes. The stock market is plummeting, and President Trump refuses to rule out the possibility of an economic recession. Is this just a temporary shock, or is the US economy truly facing a major crisis? In a recent interview, President Trump admitted that his tariffs and budget cuts might cause volatility in the market, but he refused to confirm the possibility of a recession. He claimed these disruptions are just temporary and will eventually benefit the US economy in the long run. However, looking at the current economic situation, many people are starting to doubt this claim. The stock market has experienced a dramatic drop, with the Dow Jones losing nearly 900 points in a single day, its biggest drop in over 2 years. This plunge has caused alarm in the investment community and raised significant questions about the stability of the US economy. Is this just a short-term fluctuation, or is it the beginning of a much deeper economic downturn? Not only is the stock market in trouble, but the real economy is also facing major challenges. Prices for essential goods, like food and gas, have skyrocketed, forcing consumers to spend more. Meanwhile, businesses, especially those reliant on imports and exports, are struggling with higher production costs and major disruptions in their supply chains. Trump's tariffs, which were meant to protect domestic industries and reduce dependence on imports, are having the opposite effect. Large companies, especially in manufacturing, are facing higher costs for raw materials, which leads to increased prices and decreased consumer purchasing power. Many businesses are also beginning to cut production and hiring due to rising operational costs. This raises the question: are Trump's policies truly delivering the long-term benefits he promised, or are they causing irreparable instability in the US economy? As the negative effects become more apparent, will the administration be able to reverse course before it's too late? Trump has long touted the stock market as a key indicator of economic success. However, now that the market is crashing, he insists it's just a temporary disruption. The question is, do his tariff policies and major budget cuts really represent a sound long-term strategy for the US economy? Many large companies in sectors like finance and oil are voicing concerns about these decisions. Budget cuts aren't always the best choice, especially when they affect major businesses and everyday consumers. While companies generally want less government intervention, they don't want these chaotic cuts to harm their operations. Polls show that the public is growing increasingly worried about these policies. Rising prices, job losses, and market instability are fueling growing dissatisfaction among voters. Town halls are gaining traction, as many worry that the current administration is leading the economy into an uncontrollable cliff. Democratic leaders and political groups are seizing on this situation to hold discussions, highlighting the negative effects of Trump's policies on everyday Americans. These polls not only reflect public anxiety about the economy, but also a shift in how the public views Trump's leadership in the future.